Today we're talking rookie running backs for the 2021 fantasy football season. We're going to break down the top 10 rookies. Chris, let's start at number 10. Who you got?
We got Jermar Jefferson, not one of the highly touted rookies, but there's a lot of reasons to like him. He kind of burst on the scene his freshman year. Sophomore year, dealt with an ankle injury, but he bounced back his junior year, had 858 yards and 7 touchdowns in only 6 games. And the great thing about Jefferson is he's not only a guy who can run the ball between the tackles, but he's also very good in the pass catching game, which we know is a huge plus for fantasy running backs. His great vision, great quickness. The only thing about him is he'll need to find the right landing spot. He's not a sure thing as far as, draft capital is going to go and landing spot, but if he lands in the right spot where he can be a 3-down back, he has tremendous fantasy upside.
Yeah, this is a player you definitely need to keep your eye on, especially in dynasty leagues. Not going to be a first-round pick, not going to be a highly touted name, and if he slips to the 3rd or 4th round, it might be kind of a overlooked commodity, but this is definitely somebody, like you said, who has tremendous upside. Now, let's go to number 9, Trey Sermon of Ohio State. Kind of quiet, for a team that was in the national championship and is always a powerhouse. This is a player who kind of flew under the radar until the very end of the season and put up some huge numbers the last 3 games. Can he do it on a consistent basis? His overall stat line, a little disappointing if you look at it. So you have to wonder, is he capable of being a multi-down back? And can he carry the workload in the NFL? We will see, but this is definitely a guy who has shown explosiveness. So the question is just, how will he be used at the next level?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how teams react to him because really not a lot of hype around him. And then he had that 3-game stretch where he just tore up some really good defenses. Will that be enough to propel him up in the NFL draft and make NFL teams take notice? Definitely a guy who's going to need to land in the right spot and probably doesn't really have more than a 2-down role even going forward. And then number 8, we have Chuba Hubbard. Had an incredible sophomore year, over 2,000 yards and 21 touchdowns. Struggled a little bit last year, averaging less than 100 yards per game, but still, he has the kind of size and ability NFL teams usually drool over, right? He's got great speed. He's a big running back. The downside for him here, especially from a fantasy perspective and why he's, so low on the list is he's terrible in the passing game, right? He not a very good pass catcher, think kind of like Jordan Howard. And he's also really bad in pass protection. So it's unlikely he'll ever be more than a 2-down back. But he lacks that upside, that 3-down upside that a lot of the other guys have.
Yeah, Hubbard, it's an interesting case here where a guy who definitely hurt his stock. His yards per carry average dropped to 4.7 after being well over 6 his first 2 seasons. And like you said, there are limitations. So this guy that we were really high on just a year ago, and now there's some question marks. Now, the next running back we're going to talk about is definitely going to have a more defined, limited role in the NFL because he's a big bruiser. We're talking about Rhamondre Stevenson of Oklahoma. Now, this is a guy standing at 6'4", 240-something pounds. This is somebody who can definitely get the job done near the goal line. He had experience playing at a high level, obviously, for a big program there in Oklahoma. So you have to wonder if he's just a 2-down back, if he's in the right situation, how effective can he be? This is somebody to keep an eye on. But again, you have to figure we can't put him any higher than what we have right now at number 7.
No, and this could be an A.J. Dillon type of situation, right, where he goes to a team where he's stuck in a committee, and since he's only going to be a 2-down back, might not have much of a role in year 1. And then next up, we have Michael Carter from the Tar Heels. Despite his small size, he rushed for over 1,000 yards in each of the last 2 seasons while averaging over 6 yards a carry. He's a natural in the passing game. There's a lot of hype around him and his teammate, who we'll talk about here in a little bit. The only thing is his size might be a detriment to NFL, scouts and GMs, and he might drop further in the draft. But he's another guy who brings the skill set to be able to handle a 3-down work in the NFL. He's got great speed. So if he lands in the right spot, he can absolutely be a 3-down running back and a stud in fantasy football.
This is a guy whose stock is rising fast. Wasn't really on the landscape as being a high draft pick for the NFL draft, but then late in the season, kind of like we talked about with Trey Sermon, catching some steam. He's got kind of all the intangibles that you like. He can catch the ball. He's got that breakaway speed. The size is definitely going to be a question mark, but that's not always going to be something that will hold you back if you can get the job done. All right, this next player is somebody who played in the SEC, talking about Kylin Hill, Mississippi State. He is potentially a do-it-all running back, and I know there's some questions about his breakaway speed, but this is somebody who has shown he is an effective pass catcher. He caught as many as 15 passes in one game. So this is a guy who, again, we've seen a lot of varying projections for him. Some people really high on his potential. Obviously, we have him as a top 5 running back. We think that he has the potential to be a starting running back in the NFL. Some people just don't think he has that exceptional next gear ability. It's going to be interesting to see where he lands. He's definitely going to be a lot more reliant on landing spot than some of these other backs that we're going to talk about.
Hill's another guy, you're right. If he lands in the right spot, could have a great role. And then speaking of Michael Carter's teammate, it's Javonte Williams is our next guy on our list. Had 22 touchdowns in 2020. He's a big back, but he's got the elusiveness that you look for in a running back, and he's hard to bring down, breaks a lot of tackles. Not to mention, he's only 20 years old. So, for an NFL team, that's a good thing, but it's also a good thing for your fantasy team, especially if you're in dynasty leagues. He can be an every year starting running back for your fantasy team. And in the NFL, he's definitely got all the tools you need to be a starting running back in the NFL, and we have him at number 4.
Yeah, and I'll just say this about Javonte Williams. It would not surprise me if when it's all said and done, he winds up being the most productive running back at the pro level. Now, the number 3 running back we have is a guy who didn't even play in 2020, opted out, and that is Kenneth Gainwell. And that's a player that you're going to get a lot of comps to Antonio Gibson simply because they played at Memphis. Now, look, I get that. Gibson showed that he could handle the workload when he was given it in Washington, even though he played limited snaps as a running back purely in college. Gainwell didn't have that issue. He's a guy who's carried the ball, went over 1,500 yards in 2019. He's got everything that you're looking for in a running back. But there you've got to wonder, sitting out the year with a lot of these running backs, how's it going to affect them? But with Gainwell, you've got to look at the film that we do have. You got to look at the potential upside here. And he's a guy that number 3 kind of feels right for him based on what we have seen.
Yeah, Gainwell is a guy I'm really excited about to see where he lands. I mean, obviously, running back always needs a good landing spot, but he's a guy that should have high draft capital and a good landing spot and tons of upside. And now we're to the top 2. At number 2, we have Najee Harris of the Crimson Tide, Alabama. Even though he's a big guy, he's elusive, he's quick, he's got decent speed, he can break tackles. Definitely does everything you want on the ground. If there is a question mark about him, it is in the passing game, but he did get better throughout his college career, right? Started his career, not a very good pass catcher, but every year he improved, he worked at it, and I think he's a good enough pass catcher now that NFL teams will feel confident enough to leave him on the field. Maybe not always on third down, but there'll be opportunities for him on third down. I really feel like he's going to be the number 1 running back off the board in the NFL draft because, again, just his size and his numbers are what NFL teams usually like, but he's not quite our number 1 running back.
No, and you know what? There's going to be a lot of debate about why he's not number 1 here. A lot of people have him as a top back. Look, I get it. It makes sense. There's no holes in his game, really, and that it was really huge to show his pass catching ability this past season. But we have Travis Etienne of Clemson as our number 1 back. Why? Well, he's got a little more speed, and he also has that pass catching ability. And so this is a guy who I think will be harder to scheme for. He can get open in space. He's got that breakaway ability, and I think he's a more natural pass catcher than Harris. There's really no hole in his game either. And I think Etienne is going to be a better fit for whatever team drafts him. Harris, again, no problems with him, no qualms if you have him ranked number 1, but we have Etienne just a little bit higher, and it wouldn't shock me if he's drafted first as well.
Yeah, Etienne has the perfect game for the modern NFL. The speed, the agility, the pass catching. There's really not many spots he could get drafted at where you would think that's a bad spot for him. So to me, he's got just immense fantasy upside. He could be one of those guys who becomes an every year, first round running back in fantasy drafts.
Absolutely. What do you guys think? Who's your top 10? Is there somebody we left out that you think belongs here? Let's talk about it. Hit us up with a comment. Of course, give us a thumbs up if you like this video, whether you agree or not with our rankings, and hit that subscribe button. If you haven't already, we're going to be breaking down all these rookies throughout the preseason. And of course, these rankings will be updated again after the NFL draft. Let's see where these players wind up. All right. Thanks for watching.